Here we go. One in a row. It's the Newcastle United Digest. Let's get started, everybody. Welcome back to the Newcastle United Digest, the channel giving you tuned content in bite-sized chunks. My name is Adam Snyder, and this episode is going to be all about Newcastle's win against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup on Wednesday, October the 30th. They've only been Chelsea's B-side, but I don't care. A win is a win, and we get to talk about that instead of yet another loss or disappointing draw. So we'll just be talking about summaries of some things I saw that were good and bad in both the first and second half, talk about my ratings by position, and we'll talk about what's coming up ahead this weekend as Arsenal comes to St. James Park. Before I get started about the first half itself, we have to make note about the changes that both teams made to their lineups compared to what they played on Sunday. Newcastle made 5 changes, which is kind of surprising considering they have Arsenal coming up this weekend. So I wasn't expecting the field this strong of a lineup. They had Lloyd Kelly start over Dan Burn. They had Emil Kraft come in and replace Tino Livramento. Sean Longstaff returned to the starting 11 and let Bruno Guimaraes get a rest. Joe Willock started over Miguel Almiron and Jacob Murphy. And the biggest surprise was Anthony Gordon returning to the lineup. He replaced Harvey Barnes. He was a late scratch on Saturday, and it was reported as a groin injury, but obviously it wasn't as severe as everybody thought, and just the few days off gave him a little bit of extra rest, and he was able to play the full 90 in this game. And not to be outdone, Chelsea replaced everyone. They made 11 changes, which means they still had 33 million more starting players that they could have played in this game, and who knows, they still probably would have lost. Basically, we played their B team, and I'm okay with that because what it allowed us to do is get our mojo back, because a lot of things that we saw earlier on the season and kind of lost over the last couple of international breaks came back. And one of those things was the press. Chelsea's makeshift lineup allowed for a lot of miscommunication, a lot of unfamiliarity with how each person plays and how they interact with each other. And it invited Newcastle to come in and play a very intense press straight up the middle. And one of those opportunities led to a goal. You had the first run of press, then you had Joe Linton and Tonali make tackles. Tonali was able to make a pass and lead to Isak for the first goal. It was very quick. It really caught Chelsea by surprise, and it wasn't going to be the last time they did that. They did that several times throughout the half. And they had some really good opportunities as a result. Unfortunately, one of those was Joe Linton's before this, who rifled it off the post from 6 yards. Yeah. Just tap it in, Joe. Just tap it in. Another big plus that we've been missing this season was a set-piece goal. It was a free kick from the left-hand side that was lofted beautifully in, created a lot of chaos, and ended up being an own goal by Chelsea. But you had plenty of black and white shirts in the area, ready to pounce, and the Chelsea players beat them to it. What can I say? It wasn't all sunshine and roses this half, though, because there were a few defensive wobbles that did lead to some quality chances. One of the things I noticed was, once again, Fabian Schär was attracted to the ball like a moth to light. He just follows the ball around, watches the ball, gets kind of drifts toward the ball, but doesn't really attack the ball. This leads to a lot of opportunities where forwards can drop in right behind him. They loft the ball right over Schär's shoulder, and they get an easy shot in, if not a goal. This is one of those things that Schär's developed a really bad habit of doing this season, and I'm really hoping that with some additional coaching, this can be resolved going forward. Lloyd Kelly was also the subject of a dodgy giveaway at midfield. It led to another Chelsea buildup and a good quality scoring chance. Thankfully, Nick Pope was at the ready for this entire game, made some quality saves throughout it, and kept Newcastle in this game. The second half was very, very different compared to the first half. You had Newcastle playing a lot more compact. They were sitting back. They weren't completely sitting back and parking the bus, but they were looking for their opportunities to counter. Lloyd Kelly made some humongous blocks, one in the first half, one in the second half. And it was one of those things where it was nice to see him be in the lineup and be willing to throw his body in the line to block shots. One of the things that was a little bit questionable, a little bit scary was Nick Pope and coming out on a cross that did not go very well. He went out for a punch, got in the way of one of his defenders, and it fell right to a Chelsea player from about 25 yards out. If he had any sense, he would have shot the ball, but he didn't. He took a touch. Fortunately, he was not able to get a quality shot off, and the play kind of fizzled out after that, but it could have been much, much worse. One of the things that was discussed during the broadcast of this game was the possibility of Nick Pope fighting his way back into the England squad and maybe getting the number one shirt off of Jordan Pickford. After today and after a few other games I've seen him play, I'm not so sure that's the best idea. He is too susceptible to overplaying a risk and making some pretty poor decisions on balls that really should not be played by a goalkeeper and should be left to his defenders. But he still insists on doing it. It nearly cost him this game, and probably the most famous one was when he came out and handled the ball shortly before the League Cup final and was suspended and couldn't play in it. Had he actually stayed back and not got sent off, we might have had a better chance in winning the League Cup. Just saying. Another thing that was great to see was how well we played this game out and how well we saw it. We saw the game out. Defensive shape was good throughout the second half, and Chelsea just wasn't clever enough or had any good enough ideas to break us down or get our defensive shape to move or stretch out. And that was just great coaching and great discipline by the entire unit. We also had some great counters on the stretch, but it really seemed like the midfielders were a little bit gun shy to rifle a shot from the top of the penalty area. Sandro Tonali had a clear opportunity from about 25 yards out, but he chose to pass. You had Bruno, when he came out and replaced Tonali, pass up a shot and passed it. He had a really good shot. And Joe Linton on the break had a great shot from just outside the penalty area, but he also chose to take the pass. I don't understand, if you're going to have these midfielders jumping the play, why are they so gun shy to take a shot? For me, midfielders jumping in on the attack, that's their role. Take the long range shot. You don't have to distribute all the time. Keep the defense honest, take the long shot, because then that way you pull them out, and later on, when you want to make the pass, you are able to make the pass into more space. I know I'm nitpicking a little bit, but these are things that down the stretch and against other teams, if you take the long range shot, those teams are going to see it on film, and they're going to have it in the back of their minds where they're not going to be able to just, cheat back and cheat back and cheat back and wait for you to make the pass if they know you have a possibility of taking a shot on them. One of the things I must give Eddie Howe credit is that he did a great job of managing this game up 2-0. One of the things I've heard a lot, not just watching football, but playing myself in junior high and high school, the 2-0 lead is the most dangerous one to hold. And they did a marvelous job of doing it and could have made it 3-0 at a few opportunities, but it just wasn't meant to be. But they weren't conceding good opportunities on the defensive side of the ball, meaning that 2-0 lead was pretty secure, especially when you saw Cole Palmer not even get off the bench to warm up for this game. You knew this was pretty much in the bag. And now let's move on to our ratings by position for this game. And we'll start with Nick Pope in goal. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. A clean sheet is a clean sheet, but it could have very easily been 2-1 or even worse had Chelsea gotten back in the game. There was that play that I mentioned in the second half where he came off his line and flubbed a clearance. It fell to a Chelsea player, and they were unable to convert on a wide-open goal. I also thought there were some saves that he made where he punched the ball out of the way. It looked good, but it could have also gone really, really bad for him. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, go back and watch the goal that he conceded against Spurs early this season. It's exactly what happened. He punched the ball right path of somebody for Spurs, and they buried it. Now, defense, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10 as well. Other than those minor hiccups I mentioned in the first half, the defensive held their own very well. When they had the opportunity to go forward, Hall, Kraft, and Livramento, when he came on, were all very willing to jump in on the attack, and they provided very positive input when they bombed forward. The midfield, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. And I have to say that Joe Linton and Tonali and Sean Longstaff were magnificent this game. This is probably the third best midfield performance I've seen all season. And it was just a lot of fun to watch. You had Joe Linton and Tonali bombing forward. You had Sean Longstaff mopping up on the defensive side of the ball. And I really don't think a lot of people understand or grasp or appreciate just how much Sean Longstaff means to this midfield. Yes, I slated him earlier this season because of poor performances. I didn't slate him as a player, I slated him for his performances. And I think that the time away from the starting 11 meant that Sean learned from his mistakes and he was hungry to get back in the side. And it showed in this performance. He was solid going forward and he was a monster going back. He was a great contributor on the defensive side of the ball. Even in the first half when things were pretty wide open, he was getting himself into the box and making some clearances when he really didn't need to because it isn't his role, but he did whatever it took to make sure that the ball stayed out of the net. You got to respect him for that. The only reason this isn't a 10 out of 10 game is, well, midfield didn't score. They had their opportunities. Jolinton missed a sitter. You had Tonali and Bruno and eventually later on Jolinton again had the opportunity to take that long range shot, but they just didn't take it. I want to see that more from the midfield, especially when they have wide open opportunities to take the shot. It keeps defenses honest. The forwards, I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10. They were fantastic on the press. And I do mean fantastic on the press. That Isak goal was a result of the press, but it was not the only dangerous opportunity they had. The front three of Gordon, Isak, and Willock looked like they were enjoying their time together, trying their best to help each other score. There were only two things that caused this to not be a 10 out of 10 for the forwards as well. One of them was in the second half. It was Isak's defensive contribution and his hold-up play. I saw him just kind of walking around and jogging the center stripe, just kind of haphazardly putting him in passing lanes to prevent Chelsea from knocking the ball back and forth. But I wanted to see him do a little bit more. I'm not asking him to like fully sprint at people to try and play keep away, but at least stick a leg out and try to intercept a pass. I just didn't see him doing that. I wish that he was doing more of that. The other thing was when he had the ball on the build out after being compressed for so long, his hold-up play wasn't very good. He was getting stripped left and right, and it really put a lot more strain on the midfield and defense than it really should have. Once Osula came on, he did a much better job of doing this as Isak's replacement, and he took a shot from long range. Imagine that. It kept the defense honest. And of course, speaking of missed shots, Osula's was one of these shots that, well, it hit the post. Jolinton's was the worst of them because he was at one point playing on the wing. That was so frustrating because it was from 6 yards out. It was a sitter and he couldn't convert. At least the other two shots that went off the post were from a little bit longer distance. And set pieces, I'm also going to give a 9 out of 10. We didn't concede any off of set pieces. We did well to defend set pieces. And the second goal that we scored was scored directly off of a free kick. The Magpies have yet to score a corner kick this season, and that would have been a 10 out of 10 for set pieces for me. Overall, that gives this performance an 8.4 out of 10, one of the higher ones of the season. A solid win against Chelsea's B team was a confidence booster I think the entire team needed. And it did a lot to stave off the talk of Eddie Howe making an early exit this season. Who knows? It just might have saved his job. And now let's move on to Saturday's game. against Arsenal. This will be an early kickoff for all of you. If you are on the East Coast, this will be an 8:30 kickoff, 7:30 in the Central Time Zone, 6:30 in Mountain Time, and 5:30 on the West Coast. It's a little bit later than normal just because of the difference in daylight savings time, and let's all enjoy an extra hour of sleep before this one starts. And if you're watching this in the United States, this will be on USA on most basic cable packages. I have 4 points that Newcastle really need to pay attention to in order to have a shot at least salvaging a point, if not even, maybe even taking all three and keeping them at St. James Park. The first one is going to be contain Bukayo Saka. He's a very fast, very talented winger who has absolutely no problem switching between the goal scorer and playmaker roles. In Premier League play, he has 3 goals and 7 assists for the Gunners. That means the left-sided defense will have their work cut out for them when Arsenal's on the break. If Hall gets caught upfield, then the mismatch between Saka and Dan Burn could be a very costly one. So there's going to have to be a lot of communication, a lot of teamwork to make sure that they contain Saka on the right-hand side. And the next one is going to be defensive discipline overall. Arsenal's ability to build out from anywhere in the field will prove to be a major challenge for Newcastle. It will require a lot of defensive discipline. That means people like Fabian Schär can't get all moth-eyed and just get attracted to the ball all the time. He's going to have to play his position, stand his ground. And it's also going to mean that Dan Burn can't get caught at midfield on a normal build-out. He can't be that aggressive. And I really hope that that's being coached into this side between now and Saturday. Because if they do that, that means they're allowing Saka and anybody else to just pop right in behind and have an easy shot on Pope. And the next one is to continue applying pressure. The Gunners are very good at building out of the back, but they're not 100% effective. If we apply some pressure, we can see some opportunities appear. Maybe not exactly like the goal that Isak scored today, but we'll still see some good opportunities. One of the things that they can do is isolate on the touch lines, not at the middle like we saw today. I think that'll be the key to a successful press on Saturday. And lastly, have no fear. Treat this team like any other team. Don't treat them like they're third place in the table and you're sitting in 12th. Act like you're playing a Champions League rival, because ultimately, down the line, this will be a Champions League rival matchup. Just like when they played Manchester City, Newcastle is not afraid to take the game to a team that would really intimidate other teams near them in the table. This attitude really served them well against Man City and also against Spurs, where they got a 2-1 win. And it can pay off playing at St. James's Park as well. And that will do it for this episode of the Newcastle United Digest. I hope that you enjoyed this one. And if you are not yet a subscriber, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications when new episodes are released. Currently, this will be the last episode of this week, and we'll be back to hopefully 3 episodes next week. We'll do a review on Monday, a preview on Friday, and I'll have something special for you on Wednesday. So until then, my name is Adam Snyder. This is the Newcastle United Digest. We'll see you then. Bye for now.